In delicate ecosystems such as the Great Lakes, invasive species are a constant threat, ecologically and economically. Asian carp have been identified as potentially disastrous were they to get established here. So far, that's been avoided, but they've been moving steadily this way since they were first introduced to the southern U.S. 50 years ago. Environmental journalist Andrew Reeves details the scope of the challenge to keep them out of our waterways in his new book. It's called Overrun, Dispatches from the Asian Carp Crisis. And he joins us now for more. Andrew, nice to have you in that chair.
Thanks so much for having me.
When did you first become aware that this was, as you've put it, a crisis?
Around 2013, I wrote a magazine feature for this magazine about this, but really only had the opportunity to look at the Great Lakes, but it didn't really take much to realize that the issue went so much deeper, stretching into Kentucky and all the way into Minnesota, down to the Gulf Coast, and all the way in between following the Mississippi River. And then I realized that the scope and the breadth of this problem was so massive, and the stories I was hearing about it seemed so small in comparison that I really wanted to dive in to be able to get a better understanding for if they're on their way here, how did they get here and why, and before thinking about what we can do about it.
Well, let's pick up on that, because the name obviously suggests they're not from here, so how did they get over here?
We had this brilliant idea after Silent Spring came out in the early 1960s that our, rather indiscriminate spraying of chemical pesticides was really terrible for the environment.
This is Rachel Carson's book. Real environmental awakening for so many people.
Absolutely, led to the banning of DDT in America within a decade. But one of the things that came out of this was this realization that spraying chemicals was often really terrible and working its way through bioaccumulation up through the ecosystems. So we wanted a better way to do that. And one of the solutions that Rachel Carson proposed was biological control. So grass carp initially were brought over with the idea being they will be able to help clean irrigation ponds, golf course ponds, the water intake pipes for hydroelectric plants, things that were causing at the time, tens of millions of dollars in damages. Turns out, though, that our biosecurity policies in universities and agencies were really terrible, basically, and the fish were able to get into smaller tributaries of the Mississippi, which they ended up using as the sort of invasion pathway. For bighead and silver carp, which are two of the other species that we talk about Asian carp, for them, they were initially brought over to clean catfish ponds to prevent algae blooms from growing in catfish ponds, but then it turned out they were really terrible at it. So then we thought, can we use them to clean sewage lagoons? And it turns out they could, but when the funding ran out to see if that idea was going to make sense, we basically never had another use for them, and we just let them go into the local waterways.
So for many decades, they were kind of regarded as a sort of wonder fish, were they not?
Well, this was it. I went back and found a lot of the research where you were seeing these arguments of, grass carp cartoons of them ripping their shirt open with the Superman's crest underneath. They were regarded as this miracle worker, this wonder fish. And in many ways they were. The things that they do in terms of, for grass carp, taking plant matter and turning it into its sole source of food, not many other fish can do that really effectively. So they're very good at it, but it's because they're so good at these things that in their native range is fine, but here they haven't evolved in that same ecosystem and no one can compete with them, and so their populations have exploded.
We want to show some footage of that, because this is crazy. What these fish can do is crazy. So why don't we do that right now? Sheldon, if you would, here's the Asian carp at work. Please.
Here they come. Look at him go!
Now, if you go online, you will find dozens and dozens of files just like that of people going down rivers and these things jumping all over the place. And it looks hilarious, but those things hurt like hell when they hit you, don't they?
They do. I spent some time in Ottawa, Illinois, with some commercial fishers who were going out to try and catch them. And it's presented in this really lighthearted way, but when you see that, you know that there is something terribly wrong with the ecosystem, for starters. But beyond that, when they're 15, 20-pound fish like you saw in the video, when they're flying at you at 35, 40 kilometers an hour, there have been news reports of people having broken noses, broken collarbones, concussions. One woman in the Illinois River was on a jet ski and was hit by one of them and knocked unconscious, and she had to be dragged from the water before her boat was sort of subsumed by a barge that was passing by. So For cottagers, and I spoke with some people on the Georgian Bay Cottagers Association about this recently, they're really worried about just the simple act of getting to a cottage on an island if you're taking a boat through waters that are filled with silver and bighead carp.
Do we have any sense about why they react that way when boats go through?
It's the frequency of the boat motor. So if it's a low hum, they tend not to panic, but especially for silver carp, because they're smaller, they have that fight or flight reaction. And so when they hear that, their reaction is to jump out of the water. Big heads, because they're bigger, they tend to be a little less fearful of the boat motor sounds, but they don't have that same reaction.
What's that one there that we're looking at now?
That is a big head carp.
That's a big head.
So one of the ones that I was had the opportunity to sort of haul in on the boat I was in Illinois, I sort of treated it like a kettlebell, like I was doing exercises. I had to make sure that I bent my knees and grabbed it from underneath the chin, because these fish can routinely grow between like 40 and 80 pounds or more, which is massive by freshwater fish standards.
And how fast do they multiply?
Usually they're 2-3 times a year they have the opportunity to spawn, depending if there's a lot of like fast-moving water. If they can find the tributary rivers they need to lay their eggs, and if they get the fast-moving water, they can usually find the opportunity 2-3 times a year to be able to spawn.
Do they eat much?
They do, usually upwards of 40, 50 to 70% of their body weight each day. So grass carp are going to be eating plants mostly. We're really worried about them because if they run out of plant material in the water, they might attack wetlands and basically denude wetlands. Whereas silvers and bigheads, they're filter feeders. So they're just moving through the water column eating phyto and zooplankton, which is the same food that most native fish need at some point in their lives to be able to survive.
When did science realize that it was going to have a much bigger problem dealing with this fish than the problem was that they originally set out to try to solve?
Well, initially, most of the research in the 1960s was, well, we've got these miracle fish, but can we solve the problem of spawning them effectively? No one really spent a lot of time until the early to mid-1970s into the 80s actually saying, well, okay, we can spawn them now, but if they make it into the wild, what will that impact be? And I was shocked as I went and did more of the research to find out that in so many parts of the United States, especially the southern states where they've been there for decades and decades, we don't actually have a lot of research suggesting what that impact might be. We still have to guess, because when federal research dollars are scarce, people have been really inclined to say, let's focus on the Great Lakes because this is an area they haven't invaded yet, whereas Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, Louisiana, they're there and we can't really do anything about it. So we basically just have to rely on a lot of anecdotal evidence to understand what those impacts are going to be.
Let's throw up another video here, and this is, Sheldon, you want to roll this? This would be the introduction of the grass carp in Arkansas, as you just referred, and what's happening sort of from the 1960s and onward. And my goodness, look at clearly the proliferation speaks for itself in that map right there. And then if we can show the next one right after this, the Mississippi River watershed, and you know, they are coming north, Andrew. They are coming north. Are they in the Great Lakes at all yet?
We mostly find them as one-offs. So back in September 2015, the Toronto Region and Conservation Authority was called in when near the Toronto Islands. We found, I think it was 8 to 10 grass carp there. We've also found them in the Grand River. I think back in the 80s, they found 1 or 2 in the Don River. So we have found one-offs. And then in Lake Erie side, we see them in the Sandusky or the Maumee River. But they've always been one-off catches. There has never been any evidence to suggest that there's an established breeding population, but the fact that we keep finding them in different stages of their life cycle and we keep finding these one-offs is worrying enough that we're moving to protect this $7 billion fishery in the Great Lakes.
What do you think the explanation is for the fact that, given how quickly they multiply, and given that they are moving north, why haven't they overrun us yet?
In some cases, because the barriers that we've put in place to stop them have been effective. So in Chicago, we do have electric barriers there. Illinois has also done a tremendous job paying commercial fishermen to go out and hit sections of the Illinois River for 8 months of the year in order to be able to take as many as they can from the water. So the interesting thing where we're seeing a lot of the current panic about Asian carp is in places like Kentucky and Minnesota, where they're moving into new parts of tributaries of the Mississippi. But why haven't they made it here? They've slowed down a little bit. And I think we've sort of gotten wise to how they breed and what some of those cues are and what we can do to remove them, which means that we've gotten smarter and so their numbers have not proceeded in the way we thought they might.
If their numbers were to arrive in the Great Lakes in ways that concern scientists and environmentalists and so on, What are the risks that you're concerned that they pose?
Well, we often hear talk of this, the $7 billion Great Lakes fishery, for example. So between the impact that grass carp might have on wetlands, but then you also have like the ecological impact that silvers and bigheads would have by eating the lunch, basically, of most native species throughout the Great Lakes. There are certain areas in the Great Lakes where you also have to appreciate that it's an ecological concern, but it's also a social and an economic concern as well. For someone who runs, fishing tours in Lake Erie, that could decimate their business. For cottagers who simply want to be able to get to property that's been in their family's history for generations, they might have an issue if they are fearful of taking the boat to the island cottage. So I really wanted to explore in the book that yes, there is the environmental concern of this, but it's political, it's social, it's economic as well.
Can we eat our way out of this problem?
Yes and no. Biologists are really fearful about creating a market for an invasive species that the government is spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year to eradicate. There's also a fear that if someone thinks they can make some money from something, that they might move the fish to new places where we don't want them. The end result is, yeah, I've eaten them. They're tasty enough. They're a white fish. You would be really hard-pressed to tell the difference between eating silver bighead carp than you would most other lake fish that are coming out of Lake Erie or most other, ocean whitefish. But the bones are a really big impediment to them. They work in this lattice-like structure, which means most restaurants, if they were to sell a fillet of bighead carp, for example, they would have to charge $60 to $80 US in order to be able to recoup their expenses because it is so difficult to process. So the short answer is yes, but we haven't, because there's a different culinary tradition in North America of how we consume fish than there is in their native ranges in China and Russia, where it's presented as a whole fish and bones are less of an issue.
Got it. Let's do an excerpt from the book here, shall we? Sheldon, if you would. In 2006, researchers from the Great Lakes Institute for Environmental Research at the University of Windsor found the cost of just 21 non-Indigenous species to Canada to be between $13.3 billion and $34.5 billion. 2 years before, Cornell University evolutionary biologist David Pimentel updated a previous estimate of what nuisance species cost the United States. No easy task, given that over 50,000 non-native species, including relatively benign additions like corn, wheat, and poultry, have arrived in America and its territorial possessions since 1776. Still, Pimentel figured that invasives cost the U.S. roughly $120 billion annually, a figure he calls conservative, since no monetary value was assigned to intangibles like species extinction, aesthetics, or biodiversity loss. Have there been attempts to control these fish by trying to limit their breeding potential?
There are some scientific solutions that will look at this. One of the things we've been trying out is pheromone controls to be able to direct species to specific tributary rivers so we can corral their populations and then basically net them to remove them as an effective way. We also have found that working with CO2 bubbles or acoustic sound barriers, if you look at where locks and dams are in major rivers, you can use those as natural choke points to be able to stop their spread. The interesting thing is we haven't found ways to be able to limit their ability to reproduce so much as we've gotten smart to the timings of when they reproduce. So we figure if we can be particularly creative and effective at when we want to try and corral them so that they don't have the opportunity to take advantage of those spawning cues for fast-moving water, then we'll have greater success with them.
You having looked at it, do you think it would be a good idea to try to eradicate this species entirely?
So I talk with a lot of researchers with U.S. Geological Survey and others. Their official literature still uses the expression eradication. The interesting thing is that when you talk with them off the record, you hear a much different story, and it's very much presented as they are here, they are part of the landscape. I often, when I'm talking about this, go back to the example of sea lamprey in the Great Lakes from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. Eventually, we found a pesticide that we were able to employ in certain rivers that really limited their ability to spawn. So it meant that we were able to take, at the cost of $20 million a year that we split with the United States, we took sea lamprey from 90% or 100% of their historic high down to about 10%. So now they are part of that ecosystem, but they are not overrunning it in the way that I suggest that Asian carp might. So anytime I'm talking about this and this idea of eradication, I really strongly caution against it. My hope, and I think the best case scenario for Asian carp, is that we find a way to be able to manage their populations so that they, like sea lamprey, might become a part of these ecosystems without becoming a dominant feature of them.
Presumably there's a species out there that preys on Asian carp? Is there?
So I was asking a researcher friend of mine who's in the book from the University of Minnesota about this recently. He says not really. From his research in their native range, there's some speculation that perhaps river dolphins in the Yangtze River historically might have preyed on them. But because they evolved in a lot of these ecosystems in China and Russia, they never really overran their carrying capacity. They evolved in that ecosystem. They were simply a part of it. But you can see from the size, they are such a big fish that there really hasn't been a lot that preys on them. But anytime someone asks that, I say, well, we have to be really careful because we've kind of gotten bitten in the past by thinking, we'll introduce one species to deal with another, and then where does it end? And does the cure become worse than the disease?
The law of unintended consequences is always waiting around the corner,
Exactly.
isn't it? Okay, biologists want an answer here, bureaucrats want an answer, governments want an answer, people with an economic stake in this want an answer, fishermen and women want an answer. Everybody thinks they may have a solution on their own to bring to bear here. Do they?
There are so many cooks in this kitchen. It's incredible as I was going through it. So the Asian Carp Regional Coordinating Committee, which was created after 2009, has dozens and dozens and dozens of members at the state and federal level in the United States, but then also at the provincial and federal level here in Canada. I did hear, though, from a number of people who have worked on these kinds of international issues that this kind of cross-border collaboration might actually be the crown jewel in all of this, because there are approximately 190 other invasives in the Great Lakes who could potentially work their way into the Mississippi River at any moment. And we know that there will be another invasive du jour that we will have to worry about at some time. So the real issue is, how are we able to work effectively together so that it doesn't seem like we're sort of at cross purposes? In terms of like a silver bullet, I mean, one of the conclusions I draw really is that we have these big conceptual solutions like hydrologic separation to physically separate the Great Lakes from the Mississippi Basin, but then we also have small-scale solutions like paying fishermen to go and remove them, and we know that this is working. So I think that any solution we find needs to really grapple with these big conceptual solutions, while also realizing that there are a lot of scientific solutions that we have really kept in lab. We haven't given them the space they need to try them out in the field. So that's another conclusion I draw, in addition to paying fishermen to do what they've been doing forever, which was to go out there and remove fish from the water.
How well, though? You mean you've got the U.S. government, the Canadian government, you've got state governments in the States, you've got provincial governments here. They all may have their own agendas or approaches. How well are they working together to try to resolve this?
Well, in Canada, for example, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, because they know they're on a different part of the invasion timeline, they've really focused their efforts on looking at what the impacts might be in the Great Lakes. So most of the research that we have in North America about their impacts in the Great Lakes has originated in Canada, whereas a lot of the research regarding control methods for them, for example, have originated in the United States, where they are very much not in their backyard, they're in their front yard, they're in the house. And so this is why we've really sort of seen, how can we make sure that we don't duplicate our efforts, and how do we work together effectively? So when I spent some time in Mississauga with DFO workers on the Credit River, as part of their monitoring efforts for Asian carp there, one of the things they had was they had this massive broom handle with a plunger screwed onto the bottom that they were using to slap and smash at the water to rustle up any Asian carp that might be in the river. And when I asked the researchers, you're government workers, you pay, or you're paid well enough, shouldn't you have a more high-tech solution to this? And they said, well, we actually found this out from working with commercial fishermen in Illinois. And this is a really cost-effective, but also just effective solution that really rustles up fish. So why spend more money than we necessarily need to when we've learned this really valuable advice from our friends in the States?
You mentioned Illinois, and I know you mentioned in the book, of course, Chicago's got some pretty adventurous things going on. Like what?
They have had their electric barriers in place since the early 2000s. Interestingly enough, we talk about them as a carp barrier, but they were actually introduced for another invasive species, but it took so long to get them built that invasive actually moved through Chicago before they were able to do it. So, Chicago has become this ground zero, but in a lot of ways, they've gone quiet there recently simply because the efforts to fish them out in the Mississippi River have been so effective. But it's also just south of Chicago that the Army Corps of Engineers has been proposing to build one of their locks and dams at Brandon Road. Initially, the cost for this was pegged at around $276 million to do this. That figure has now ballooned to about 7.5, almost 8 million or more. There are other groups who say that even the Brandon Road study wasn't congressionally mandated. They were never given the authorization to look there. So it's politics, it's lobbying, it's finances. It's really no surprise that one of the scientific researchers I spoke with said, we've done so much scientifically to deal with this problem, but ultimately it is now a social and political problem. We've punted it back to the people, and the people and their elected representatives need to decide what we want to do about this.
Let's finish up on family here, because you interviewed the descendants of the people who brought this fish here in the first place. What do they make of the status quo?
So I called the son of one of the men who was the first person to bring over privately big head and silver carp. And he still runs the family fish farm that his father started. And I called him up and left him a voicemail. And then while I was doing another interview, he called. And when I heard the message, I'm paraphrasing, but basically it was, you're more than welcome to come out and talk to me. But if I get the feeling that you want to pin the blame for what has happened on us, I will kick you off my property really quick, which I understand, because they have borne more than their fair share of the blame for this. But what I really tried to do in the first few chapters of the book especially was to really sort of understand, for the people making these decisions in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, what were they basing it on? And it wasn't, they didn't have the benefit of 30, 40 years.
It made sense at the time.
Exactly. And they had the peer-reviewed science that really backed this up to say, this is a good idea. So I speak with them now. Most of them are very unapologetic about grass carp, simply because there are dozens and dozens of states in the U.S. where you can still use legal sterile grass carp in a lot of ways. So you're able to do that because they eat aquatic weeds and they're very good at it. The feeling around big head and silver is very different. I think the idea that we had initially to use them for catfish ponds and then sewage lagoons, I think a lot of people I spoke with, if we had the opportunity to go back and take that one back, we would. But grass carp, they felt very differently about.
Who knew fish could be so interesting?
Thank you.
But they are. Overrun, dispatches from the Asian Carp Crisis. It's brought Andrew Reeves to our studio tonight. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.